For those of you who don't know me, I'm with Ascend Learning now, but before I took this position, I was with Pearson for over 20 years, and I've been very active in the ePUB and the EDUPUB space since around 2012, when I co-chaired with Marcus Gilling the first EDUPUB workshop that got this process started. So a little bit of history to begin. The EDUPUB Alliance was created in 2013. It was a global community focused on synthesizing the work among multiple standards organizations. Loosely, the original group was the IDPF, IMS Global, the W3C, and BISG, but there were also others, the DAISY Consortium, Meridian Foundation, etc. But the approach we took was to create a lightweight superstructure to help to consolidate existing widely adopted standards. In other words, we weren't going to try to create something from scratch. We were going to use good work that was out there to create an edu-tuned profile of ePUB that served the needs of the learning space. So the deliverable that we targeted on was to create a comprehensive model for interchange and deployment of educational content based on the Open Web platform and expressed as an integrated set of specifications. It included things like ePUB 3, LTI, and other emerging standards. Some of the satellite specs that were part of the original EDUPUB profile are things like an expanded semantic vocabulary to include terms that are relevant in the education space, and such as assessments and learning objectives, open annotations, scriptable components, the interactive components, animations, etc., and distributable objects. So how those discrete entities and subcomponents can be described and interchanged between the systems. And finally, how to implement some of the IMS specs such as LTI, QTI, and Caliber. Not all of these have been realized, but those were the parameters that we scoped out in the beginning. And as I said, it's a ePUB-based but edu-centric view. So we wanted to equip the ePUB spec with everything that was needed for the education content, integrating the IMS standards such as LTI for delivery on course modules and LMS platforms, general ePUB capabilities that were needed for the education space, as I've described, and very importantly, the education focused semantic enhanced profile of ePUB 3. The existing vocabulary within ePUB just didn't adequately describe the complexity of education content. And as much as it was focused on the education space, it should be noted that the ePUB adopters in general would benefit. Anybody who's looking to create richer content experiences in ePUB would benefit from the interactivity components for the connectivity, complex design, and accessibility requirements that were being defined. And the global utility was considered essential. We took a position that accessibility and internationalization were non-negotiable components. This had to be played in different regions, in areas that had different needs around learning paradigms and styles, around layout requirements, reflow versus fixed tech, horizontal versus vertical layouts, and LMS integration, but recognizing that not everybody all over the world is focused on that completely. But we needed to embrace and support all those kind of variances and requirements depending on the localized needs of the different regions that were stakeholders. So what's the reality? Today, the reality is limited adoption, and there's several reasons for that. The uptake on the publisher's side was not what we originally had hoped or expected for. We thought that by creating a standard that everyone could focus around, it would minimize the amount of transformation that was needed to the various delivery channels, and encourage publishers to produce more rich content for those channels, while at the same time giving the reader developers a single standard that they could develop their features around and reduce their overhead accordingly. But as it turns out, most publishers continue to prefer delivering their more rich interactive content versus their own white label LMS platforms. And the readers continue to lack the support for some of the more advanced, rich interactive content features. And for the publishers, for everyone involved, frankly, the ROI is unclear in terms of the investment that's required. And finally, in some ways most importantly, the development, once the original set of specifications were delivered, were put on hiatus because we recognized that the impact of the ePUB 3.1 update was going to cover some of the things that had been defined within the EDUPUB spec originally. And then after that, the in-process at that point combination effort between the W3C and the IDPF, we realized we needed to take a pause while that was working itself out, so that when we did continue that work, it would be under that new combined organization. But there is cause for optimism. That's my optimism. Publishers have been adopting it. Pearson, where I was for many years, has over 4,500 titles converted to this format, both in US higher ed and school in Canada. And it represents the internal interchange and ingest format for our proprietary LMS platform. And that's something that I've been trying to promote to publishers generally, is to say, okay, you may not feel like third-party ebook distribution is in your best interest for your richer content, but why not make ePUB/EDUPUB your internal interchange and ingest format, because it is a packaging format, it's got consistency, it delivers that manifest to tell you, that you've got everything that you need. And then if an opportunity for a third-party delivery comes along, you're already there. There's nothing else that you have to do. You're already prepared to deliver it into those channels. How Mifflin began in 2012, and since 2015 has been delivering all their digital components as ePUB 3. Over 1,000 titles are in flight this year, and they're beginning to incorporate the EDUPUB specs. They've developed an internal reader system to provide services for some of those advanced components, and they're delivering to third-party platforms via the e-reader app for offline and cloud-based e-readers for third-party LMSs via common cartridge. And you'll see this pattern in other. Macmillan is just getting started, but they're very much committed to this framework. 150 ePUBs that they produced so far. It's their only go-forward format for digital distribution. They're not doing any PDFs anymore. They're going for full accessibility, and it's their standard format for third-party distribution. And again, it's a core ingest for their own LMS launchpad, leveraging the VitalSource platform. And Ascend, where I'm working now, we've just begun also standardizing around this model. So since last summer, and I had just joined a few months before that, so I implemented that pretty quickly. Our go-forward strategy is ePUB, EDUPUB, aligning, and then most publishers you'll see are aligning with this standard, even though it's incomplete, it needs more work. But the discipline of the workflow, the notion of pursuing a standards-based workflow and following those kind of best practices positions, I think, any publisher for success down the line, and to be able to pivot and take advantage of new opportunities as the open source ecosystem continues to expand. And then there's VitalSource, which has been a real leader in both developing the technologies to distribute ebooks in ePUB and EDUPUB format, as well as being a real leader in advancing the standard. This is not a commercial for VitalSource, but they deserve their due because they really have been not only evangelizing for it, but underwriting financially some of the development that's been critical to this. And as you can see, they've been doing this for a long time. They've really gone all in the adoption of the ePUB, EDUPUB model as their internal standard, and if over a million titles, 1.25 million titles in their library, 40% of which are ePUBs, and over 1,000 publishers represented. And if you look at the statistics in the chart, it's over 40% of the top 500 are ePUB titles. By the time you get to the top 100 and the top 25, you can see that the adoption of ePUB over PDF is really the dominant format. And as far as outside of the US, the story is good and growing. This is just a snapshot of some of the European users, which total, including the UK, almost 650,000, and even without the UK, it's well over 350,000. I used this chart just, I selected countries that were in the EU, so Magnus and others from Norway, I apologize for you not being here. But suffice it to say that there's strong representation and growing across Europe as well. So back to the question, is EDUPUB real? The answer is yes, but it needs to get realer. And by that, I mean this is a proposal for a reboot of EDUPUB. Now that the W3C and the IDPF combination has completed, we want to relaunch the Alliance under the auspices of the W3C and in close collaboration with IMS Global, who owns some of the key integration specs. So we want to rebase the ePUB for Education profile. In the US, we've come to call it ePUB for Education because EDUPUB suggested that it was a new format different than ePUB 3. It was confusing people. I personally find EDUPUB more elegant, but that's how it is. And but we're going to base it off of the 3.1 profile, which has already taken care of the accessibility features, specifying them as a must, whereas previously it was more of a should, and so it covers that aspect of what was the EDUPUB spec. We need to finalize and extend the vocabularies, tie in the LTI and caliper integration for analytics and so forth, and also pursue Readium as a baseline reference implementation. And we're going to focus on integration, as I said, aligning internal infrastructures, educate publishers on how to prepare their content and really take advantage of it, and continue to guide the reader developers on how to architect platforms that can properly support this richer content, executing this all through the work group that's going to be established within the W3C publishing community group. And that's all I have.